New to Riverside and not sure where to start, or been using it for a while but feel like you're just not getting as much out of it as you could be? Stick around. Hey, I'm Brian Miller and welcome to Audio for Content Creators, where we help you sound better and level up for all your content creation needs. And in this video, we're talking about Riverside.fm, the remote podcasting solution that I use for my podcast and I recommend to all of my clients. We're going to dive into the tips and tricks, everything you need to think about to really get the most out of this incredibly powerful but feature-rich and therefore sometimes confusing piece of software. Most of these things are not confusing. They're just not always where you think they would be or labeled the way you think, or you just don't know what something means. We're going to cover everything from the virtual studio you get access to pre-recording practices, during recording practices, post-recording practices, the role of a producer versus your role as the host or the talent, and even a little bit of tips for post-production. For starters, what is Riverside.fm? Well, as previously mentioned, it's a remote podcasting solution. Now, for years before this existed, everyone who was doing what I was doing, remote podcasting, was using Skype or Zoom. And these are not tailored for podcasters. Skype, Zoom, Google Meets, things like that. These are video conferencing softwares, the purpose of which is to have a real-time face-to-face communication. But podcasters were just retrofitting their needs onto a video conference software. Instead, Riverside.fm was built from the ground up exclusively for the purpose of remote podcasting. The biggest problem with those video conferencing solutions is the quality of the recording. The audio is terrible, the video is incredibly grainy and lackluster, plus all of your recordings are subject to the whims of the internet. So if your internet connection goes a little wonky, it blips in, it blips out. That's exactly what Riverside was trying to avoid. Not only avoid those problems, but create pristine recordings that feel like, if you do it right, you were sitting in the same room as one another, and we can enjoy a lovely, lovely experience as the listener or viewer of a podcast. And one of my favorite things about Riverside is that I've had personal communication with the leadership and the executives and some of the tech team. They're wonderful, incredible people who are truly, truly dedicated to making this as good as it can be. And so you'll find that there's a whole Facebook forum for users of Riverside, and that people like me and other users are always submitting new requests for features or advice or things that aren't quite working, and the team responds incredibly quickly. Sometimes you'll submit an idea for a new feature, and a week or two later, it shows up in the next update, and it's incredible how fast they respond, and that's a wonderful thing to have if you're going to invest in a service. So let's dive into the studio. This is what it looks like when you jump into Riverside. After you log in, this is the first thing that pops up. And what you'll notice is that I have a whole bunch of different studios here. Beyond Networking with Brian Miller, that's my podcast. What you'll find is that you're allowed to create different studios, and these are reusable. So if you run two different podcasts or a YouTube channel and a podcast or something like that, and you need different uses, you can create a virtual studio that is essentially like a different building, a different physical studio you might walk into. So like on the lot of where they film TV shows, there's a studio for Friends, and there's a studio for Seinfeld, and there's I know these are old shows and they're not on the same network, but it doesn't matter. The point is that you can think of each studio as its own room or its own building that somebody would open the door and walk into, and on the outside of that door, it's labeled which studio or which show is being recorded there. And as you can see, it is reusable, which means you get one link, you get one URL for your studio for that show, and you can send that same URL that never changes for your show to every single guest. And this is so useful. Instead of a video conferencing software which creates a new link for every single call, what you've got here is one URL, which is where your studio or your show or your project lives on Riverside, on the internet. And that means if you use a CRM and email management software to automatically send welcome messages or onboarding messages to your guests, in the weeks leading up to the interview, to the conversation or whatever, you can have the link to your studio in there, and you don't need to worry about it being a different link every time. You can just have it in the automatic welcome sequence that goes out to every single guest, and that is so useful. It saves so much manual time that I used to spend sending emails to each guest, giving them their link for their recording that we were going to do. So if you come down here and you click Go to Studio, you will see that we get the studio page. Over here, you can put in your name, click I am using headphones, because of course you should be using headphones. Let me say that one more time. You should be using headphones. Do not podcast without headphones on. You do not want your speakers to have the voice of your guest coming through and then hitting your mic and creating a feedback loop. Riverside has an option to turn on echo cancellation for people who are not using headphones. Do not do it. You as the host should be wearing headphones or earbuds, and you should require your guests to do so as well. It's simply in my welcome sequence, my automation in my CRM, it's in my prep guide, and I also verbally say it to my guests before we start recording. You need to have headphones or earbuds on to capture the highest quality recording so that blah, 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 right? You can justify it to them for the sake of the audience, for the sake of your audio capture. We want to make sure this podcast sounds like NPR. Whatever you want to do, you have headphones, they have headphones. Therefore, you check I am using headphones, and you don't need to worry about what happens when you click I am not using headphones, which means it will automatically turn on echo cancellation. You don't want an algorithm trying to do echo cancellation during your recording. And over here, of course, is where you choose your microphone and your camera. Choose your microphone, choose your camera, and it will tell you what settings you are being captured in right there. Riverside is going to detect the highest quality settings that it's allowed to capture from you and take those. And of course, if you're using a different speaker than your microphone, you can go ahead and choose what speaker you want here as well. Then come over here, click Join Studio, and we'll take a look at what it looks like to be here inside of Riverside. Now, you're gonna see a slight delay between my mouth down here in the lower corner of your screen, which is recording me off on my A10 Mini, and what Riverside is picking up from the built-in camera on my computer, which is not actually how I record, but I can't show you Riverside while I'm using the camera I normally use to film it's too many levels. Doesn't matter. Now, there are a lot of things on your recording screen, but it's really, really simple how to use it. So let's talk through what's here. You can come up here to the top and click Invite People. And from right there, you'll be able to send a direct email to somebody if you want, or simply copy the link to your studio. And you can, again, use that in a CRM, an automated sequence. You can use that anywhere as the link that you send everybody to be a guest. You'll notice you can also invite an audience or a producer, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Over here on the right side, you can title your recording. I typically title it the name of the guest or the name of the episode that I'm recording. And then you'll see you and anyone else who's in the room with you. Now you'll notice it says waiting room down here. So let's go all the way down to the bottom left corner where our settings are and take a look at those. Come down here to General to get started. You can name your studio here if you haven't done that already, and of course decide if you want it to be public or private. Most importantly, you want to enable the waiting room. Click this button to enable the waiting room. Very similar to Zoom or any other video conferencing software, the waiting room is what people land on when they click your link before you manually let them into the studio. You should always have this on. The best reason to have the waiting room on is not just because you don't want somebody to surprise you while you're, still putting your shirt on or whatever, but mostly so that you can compose yourself before you open the door, the virtual door for your guest. In other words, you're getting ready for your podcast, you're trying to get your water, you're getting your mic set, you're looking for your notes, and if a person jumps on without a waiting room, if they just show up in that moment, you look flustered, you look all over the place, and their first reaction, their first interaction with you is just kind of like a frantic, flustered vibe. Instead, I'm getting stuff ready, I'm doing my thing, and then I see somebody's in the waiting room, and I have the option to let them in or not. So, what do? I don't panic. I don't feel rushed. It's my house, it's my studio. They know that I'm gonna let them in a minute or two, and they're not in any big hurry. So, I compose myself, make sure everything's set, and then I get myself situated exactly where I want to be when they show up. I make sure that I'm ready to give them a big smile, and then I click the, let them in or admit, or I forget what it's called, but then I let them in. And so when they pop up on the screen, the first thing they see is my smiling face as the host, composed, waiting to say, hey, so-and-so, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here. To just let them in and create an amazing, warm, powerful first impression. That's the biggest reason you should use the waiting room. And now let's look at the live call quality. There's a huge difference between the quality of the live conversation you're having, which is essentially a Zoom or a Skype video chat, and the recordings. See, the recordings in Riverside are being captured natively on each person's end. My video and my audio are being captured at the source and uploaded to Riverside's cloud simultaneously or just behind real time. And everybody's is being done like that. So my guest or my co-host, theirs is also being captured on their end, on their computer, their video, their audio at the source and being uploaded, which means we get pristine recordings after everything's done. We're not capturing the live call quality like Zoom or Google Meets or Hangouts or whatever else. What we're capturing is actually the pristine recordings and then uploading them to the cloud. The live call quality is what you're seeing in real time. It's the Zoom call that you're having essentially. You should just leave this at 240p. You won't notice some big difference in real time during the recording, but it could bog down your computer or your guest's computer. And so it's best to leave this on the lowest quality for the live recording to let Riverside do what it's best at, which is capture pristine recordings and upload them to the cloud. Now under the recording tab for settings, you want to, if you're doing a video podcast, have audio and video only. If you're only doing an audio podcast, do audio only. But really, why would you be doing an audio podcast and not capturing video, at least to use on social media? I think you should be capturing video so you can promote your podcast even if the full video never makes it to the internet. Then under recording quality, I'm going for 1080p. I think 1080 is still where it's at. I don't think most people have adapted 4K as their standard for viewing, especially when they're watching a podcast or listening to a podcast on YouTube, on their phone, while they're wandering around the house with one earbud in. I leave mine at 1080. Separate tracks for internet recordings. What does this mean? The internet recording is essentially your backup recording. In case everything goes to hell and somehow everything in the world is against you and the pristine recordings on each person's end never makes it to the cloud and they disappear from existence and the tech support at Riverside can't help you get it back, you still have essentially the Zoom call. The best possible thing you can get from Zoom is the low quality backup that you get no matter what when you're here on Riverside. Now, the internet recording will have glitches. It will have low quality video. If the internet blips in and out, you'll get audio problems. All the problems we have with Zoom will be there, but it's a backup. And so you have the option to turn on separate tracks for internet recordings. It just tells you that when this is enabled, files may take longer to generate after the recording. I have never turned this on, and there's only one time in the 2 years I've been using Riverside that I wished I had it turned on. Riverside is so dependable in general, and when things go wrong, their customer service or tech support are able to recover the files. The handful of times things have ever gotten a little screwy, I've never found it necessary. I find anything that's not necessary, I don't want to bog down the software. And this is really important. Audio sample rate, very, very, very important. 48 kilohertz if you are recording video. If you are not recording video and you are never going to use this with video, then 44.1. 44.1 is the standard for audio only. 48 kilohertz is when it's combined with video. I recommend everybody pretty much leaves it on 48. Okay, noise suppression. This really depends on your circumstances. I leave it off because I'm in a professionally treated home studio running pro-grade gear, and I'm a former audio engineer who knows what they're doing. If you have fans or heaters or AC or a busy road outside or roommates that are always doing something, construction going on, and there's nothing you can do about it, or that you're not willing to or can't afford to or don't know how to treat that for real in the real world, then consider turning on noise suppression. The problem is you can never remove that once it's been captured. So if you let Riverside do noise suppression, it's going to do what it does. It's going to degrade the quality of your signal in an attempt to get rid of the background noise. but it's kind of, the problem with noise suppression is it's kind of like figuring out where a wave ends when you're on the beach watching the ocean. The algorithm that's doing noise suppression is trying to figure out what the difference is between the stuff you don't want it to capture and the stuff you do want it to capture. And trying to figure out what that wave ends, the algorithm doesn't always do a great job, and it's going to degrade the quality of the audio. If you have egregious background noise, turn it on. I'd say if you even have if you have minimal background noise, occasionally an AC, fan or something goes on in the background, leave it off and do your best to learn how to deal with that in post-processing. You can always do noise suppression in post. You can never remove it if you capture it in real time. And finally, under advanced, data usage, upload control, put it on auto and don't think twice. Now, a few quick tips for what you need to tell your guests before you record. First, before they even show up at the studio link, you have to tell them they are required to use Google Chrome and join the studio from either a laptop or a desktop computer. They cannot use their smartphone or tablet. If they have to use a smartphone or tablet, they need to download the Riverside.fm app, and you need to teach them how to do that. I have never done that ever. I have always told my guests in advance, multiple times in my welcome sequence, in my prep guide, face-to-face, you must join from a laptop or desktop computer, not a smartphone or tablet, and you must use Google Chrome. I find that telling them that as a matter of fact and not as a request or a question, nobody's ever had a problem with it. As I mentioned earlier, required they wear earbuds or headphones, which means they should click the I'm wearing headphones button, which will automatically turn off echo cancellation. Over here on the side, if you were looking at them and it said that echo cancellation was on and they were wearing headphones, if you can see that they're using headphones, you can click it to turn cancellation off. But that should never really happen. Next, you want to hit the record button as soon as you've greeted your guest when they show up after you let them in from the waiting room. Right down here, the big freaking red record button, your guest pops on the screen and you say to them, "Hey, Dave, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here. Hey, by the way, I'm going to hit record right now so I don't forget later. Don't worry though, we're not actually starting the conversation yet." And then you hit record. Why am I telling you to do this? Two reasons. One, so you don't forget to hit record later when the conversation actually starts. But the most important reason I tell you to hit record now is because people get nervous when you hit that record button. It gives you like a 5 or 6 second countdown and people get all stiff, like, okay, now I have to be on now. Instead, you hit the record as soon as they come in, and then you spend 5 or 6 minutes chatting, asking about their day, having a little chat, build rapport, tell them what to expect, make sure they got a glass of water, they feel comfortable, etc., etc. By the time you actually start the formal conversation, the formal interview, they will have completely forgotten that it's even recording, and you don't give them that cue to get stiff right before you start. You just get to flow into the conversation. And the last thing you have to do before you actually start the conversation is to remind them that because this software is capturing our audio and video and uploading it in real time, when the conversation is over, tell them, make sure you don't leave the studio. Don't leave when we're done talking. There's going to be a few minutes after we finish talking where your video and your audio is going to finish uploading. So make sure you stick around even after we sign off. You have to do that because if somebody jumps out of here too early and they've only got 94% uploaded or something, then you have to go through a process of getting them to come back and finish the upload. I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's best to not have to do it. Now let's talk about a few things you can do during the recording itself. First, focus on your conversation, not the settings. If you've paid attention to everything I already said, you've got everything working, you can trust Riverside. You do not need to worry about the settings in real time. Everything's going to be captured natively. You're going to get the best quality raw video and audio because you're going to do everything you need to do in post. So don't worry during the conversation. Just have the conversation and focus on your guest or co-host or whoever. Second, you may notice that the quality of the video is lacking. As we talked about earlier, the live call quality is going to be kind of like Zoom, and we set it to 240p, which is even worse than you're used to on Zoom. The video might even cut out from time to time. If that happens, don't panic. As long as you and your guests can still hear each other, just keep going. Don't say anything about the video cutting out. Don't break your flow. Just keep going and trust the process. Trust Riverside, because those recordings are still going to be pristine. They won't have any of the audio or video blipping issues that you're seeing during the live call. And finally, this is something that I never noticed because it doesn't matter to me, but there is no green screen option in Riverside. If you need a green screen, you're going to have to do it on your own using hardware or using OBS and sending OBS over to Riverside, or using the ATEM Mini or something like that to do a green screen. There is no green screen option built into Riverside. I know this is a highly requested feature, and so I would expect to see it show up at some point, but it's not there yet, so just be aware of that. Okay, remember how earlier I noted that you could invite a guest or an audience or a producer? Well, here's what those three things are. The guest, just what it sounds like. Don't need to explain that. An audience member is somebody who is never on video, cannot be seen or heard, but can watch and listen to your conversation. An audience member is only allowed to see whatever is happening after you hit record. So before you've hit record, they can't see you fiddling around and getting ready and scratching yourself and all those things. The second you hit record, any audience members can see and hear everything. And finally, a producer is somebody who actually has control over some of the settings here in Riverside. So they can do things like turn echo cancellation on or off. They can adjust the levels of the conversation in real time. Now, a note on the levels. You'll see each person gets a slider right here for their levels during the conversation. The key is this is just a real-time mixer. It's just for you to adjust the difference in volume between you and the guest and anybody else who's having the conversation. It does not actually affect the capture at all. But if you are way louder than the guest or somebody else, and the producer wants to in real time adjust the levels to make sure everybody feels like they're speaking at the same volume, this is especially useful if you're doing a live stream from Riverside, which is something I never do, or for any audience members who might be watching or listening in real time. But if you're only worried about producing a podcast and doing everything in post-production, you really don't need to worry about that. What else should the producer be doing? If you have a producer, if you have an editor who's filling the producer role while you're recording, your producer should be taking notes. Should be taking notes on awkward silences, long pauses, things that they want to cut out later, taking notes on any highlights that you could potentially end up putting on social media, in little clips to promote the show. Anything that the guest or you say that's worth remembering if they make good notes, is going to make their editing process and your entire post-production process a lot smoother, a lot more efficient. Okay, so you're done recording, now what? Well, you can go to the dashboard, and the dashboard is going to show your studios. Go to the studio that you are using and click View All Recordings. Lo and behold, you will see all of your recordings. You can click a recent episode, whatever you just recorded, and scroll down, or simply click Download Tracks up here. Click Download Tracks, and that was a lovely animation. It'll bring you down here to the separated tracks. These are the pristine recordings from each person's side. What you're going to want to do is click Wave for each person and Constant Frame Rate for each person. The WAV file is the full pristine audio capture, and the constant frame rate is the video where the variable frame rate problem of the internet has been adjusted so that the audio and the video will sync perfectly in post. If you only grab the WAV and the MP4, the audio and the video will get out of sync with each other over the course of an edit. You don't want that. You need the constant frame rate. It takes a little bit longer for the constant frame rate to finish, like finalizing or whatever, because there's an algorithm taking care of that. Go away for an hour or two, go about your day, come back and download everything. Or have your producer download everything, because they have access to grab this stuff directly from Riverside without you needing to grab files, download, then re-upload, send it to your producer or your editor or anything like that. Now, if you find yourself needing those backups, you can get it right here at the top right of the screen. You click the three little dots and you can download video backup or audio backup. Now, suppose something happened and your guest did leave early and you need them to come back to the studio to finish their uploads. There's a couple of different spots that you can actually get them the link to do that. One is under those same three dots, you can click copy link to upload page, and then you can email that to your guest. And the other spot is down here at the bottom left. Did your guest leave the session before finishing uploading? Send them to riverside.fm/upload. And there it is. And by the way, this is what it looks like when you show up on that upload page. Now, I wasn't actually doing anything, but if I had just been recording and I needed to come back here and finish, it would search your computer, you or the guest, whoever is clicking this, to find the recording that was stored on your computer in your local files, and it would start uploading again from where it left off. It would finish the upload. I've had to do this a couple of times with people who accidentally clicked off early, and it's always worked fine. There's only one time ever that I was unable to get them to finish the upload. The upload screen couldn't find it. I reached out to Riverside customer service, and their tech support was able to recover the uploads in the back end. So it all worked out. And one last tip for post-production: because you're going to have high quality video from each person, you don't just need to produce a standard looking remote podcast where you either have the people, you and the guest side by side on the screen, or it flips back and forth just between whoever's talking. You can actually create a third angle, which is a split screen, and you can use that to do creative edits and cover up edits and make the whole podcast just look visually more interesting by having either you or the guest or the split screen view. And I teach you how to do that in this video on the screen right now. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and come back anytime to sound better and level up. We'll see you soon.